Hey guys, this is John. I hope you're all doing well. All right, this is round 8 of the Lone Wolf League on Lee Chess, season 37. Let's take a look at the standings through 7 rounds. So here I am. I'm in the 3rd position on 5.5 out of 7. However, there are a number of players tied with me on that score. I think all the way down to Bulgakov, 1967. Yeah. So a number of players, 10 players tied at that score. And then a little separation for these 2 players at the top. Antazi 8 and Pirate of the Frisians. They have 6.5 out of 7 each. Very impressive scores. Very good players. I've looked at a few of their games. Don't recall much from their playing style or anything, but I can tell that these are strong players, possibly even titled players. I think it's not at all unlikely that many of these players have some sort of title, and they're just choosing not to display it on Lee Chess, which is totally fine. So these 2 players will be playing each other in this round. So that'll give us a little more information. Kind of thinking about the standings with 4 rounds remaining, I probably need to go 3.5 out of 4 in order to have a chance at tying for first or outright winning this tournament. 4 out of 4 would be phenomenal, but I think 3.5 out of 4 would be a good number to shoot for. So I might have a little margin for, giving up 1 draw. But I got to make the most of these remaining 4 games, clearly, because I've already dropped 1.5 points. So my pairing for this round is against Some Rapid Player, the aptly named Some Rapid Player here in the 5th position, also on 5.5. And same kind of path as me. They had 1 loss and a draw. They also had a forfeit victory in round 5. Good player, 2273 Lee Chess Classical ratings. These games are rated Lee Chess Classical, these 30 plus 30 games, but this doesn't affect your over-the-board rating or anything at all. That's probably obvious, but as I mentioned in the very first video in this series, I feel the Lone Wolf League and these Lee Chess leagues in general are some of the best practice you can get without playing an official over-the-board rated game. So if you're kind of one of these online players who wants to test their skills against good players around your rating or higher in a competitive environment where you also have the ability to prepare for some of these games and there's a little more formality with the structure of the league, I highly, highly recommend checking out the Lone Wolf League or the 45 plus 45 League, which is the sister league, if you will, for Lone Wolf. So it's going to make you a better player if you can dedicate the time to playing these. All right, so playing Some Rapid Player. I have the black pieces. 4 games left. Very important that I score. So hopefully a win, but at minimum a draw. All right, I have nothing to add. Let's get into my preparation for this game and see what happens in the game itself. Thanks, guys, for watching. Enjoy. Okay, it is currently 1:32 p.m., and the game is at the top of the hour in 28 minutes at 2 o'clock p.m., local time for me. Let's see who we have this week. It's Some Rapid Player. And looking at their profile, looks like they might be giving their name here. William Waker. I see FIDE rating 1842, which is impressive given the online ratings that this player has. But I'm not that surprised these days by players who have an over-the-board rating that's much lower than their online ratings. That's so common. A lot of younger players have ratings like that. Their over-the-board rating just hasn't caught up to their actual strength. And it's hard to know sometimes how the ratings themselves map at different time controls. But looking at the online ratings for this player, pretty consistent across time controls. 23, 2200. Yeah, it looks like a good player. So we are pretty deep into the season at this point. Let's check out what classical games they've played so far in the league. I believe they might have had 1 forfeit victory, but I think they played all the other games. So I have the black pieces in this one. This is a game that Some Rapid Player played as black. Okay, they played a hyper-modern type system. This was 45 plus 45, so they must be in that league as well. Looking at the time spent, too, is always useful when doing this preparation, because you can see this player was playing pretty fast. And then when white played e6, this breaking move e6, black started slowing down, and Some Rapid Player actually used 8 minutes on this move to take. So I just like to pay attention to stuff like that because it indicates where their level of comfort is with their preparation, how deep they go. Here's a 60 plus 30 game, probably not a league game. Again, they were black. This was a Sicilian, maybe just mixing up openings. Yeah, we have a Pearts, a Sicilian. Another game where they were black. They played against the Jobava London. So it looks like this player plays a lot of long time control chess online. I like the position they had here, by the way. This is something I would play as black. But they blundered, it looks like. Bishop takes a3, played pretty quickly, plenty of time on the clock, and they ran into rook a1, after which black is losing a piece. And immediately resigned, actually. So there's some commentary here. So I'm doing ultra quick prep for games like this. But I could, of course, go a lot deeper. And in fact, if you're trying to maximize your results in a league like this, you probably want to go deeper than just, less than 30 minutes. You'd be wanting to look at these players throughout the week leading up to the game, maybe a little bit each day, try to build kind of a player profile of them over time versus just trying to do it on the spot. I would really only recommend strong players attempt something like what I'm doing. And even for me, I think it's at the limit of what I can expect if I want decent results against these players, because everybody in the league is good. And you guys have seen, I've already taken one loss and also drew a game too. So tough opponents. But let's drill down a little deeper. So I see a game where some rapid player played e4. That was a French. Another e4 game. Yeah, Sicilian. So this might be the game, folks, where if I want to play Scandinavian, I might have a chance. Yeah. Maybe I can look at one game that they actually played in this league. I think it was this. I think this is the only game that they lost in this league. So some rapid player was playing black. Another Sicilian. Yeah, this is Theory. Again, watch the time. Oh, you can't even see. That's been covered up. Sorry, but black's been playing pretty much instantaneously. So has white. Really odd line where the king comes to f3, right? Yeah, and white got a good position. So where did black slow down in this one? Where was black perhaps surprised? Maybe this king f3 move? Escaping the pin? Threatening to take the knight? Could be. Looks like white was still in book at this point. I don't think you played king e2, king f3 with 4 minutes more than you started with if you're not in preparation still. And it looks like white got a good grip on the position and actually started attacking black on the queen side. Oh, but black was better, if not winning. So yeah, that's far from the end of the story. Maybe white's prep hit, but weird position with that white rook on b6. Oh, I'm sorry. So I got the colors wrong. Some rapid player was actually playing white in this game. You guys probably noticed that before I did. So that is how they lost. Okay, so they had a good position out of the opening. They were playing very quickly and then overpressed from the looks of it. Maybe that b5 move, I think the engine was indicating. Yeah, b5 was an overreach. Okay. Yeah, so I think this player is going to be pretty booked up. So let's drill down a little bit deeper. Maybe I can just click into one of these games. Go to the opening explorer. This is my opponent from last week, Faznaz. So let's look at some rapid player. You can see it populates from the players who you've previously looked at, or in the case of that game I just played through, FWG2 and some rapid players. So let's check. Wow, lots of games played here. Primarily an e4 player, though. Knight f3, d4 played very seldom. Still over 100 games with knight f3, but I think we got to prep for e4 primarily. So yeah, it does look like this player is pretty well prepared, probably pretty sharp. That line we just saw in that last game, very chaotic looking line, even with preparation. I mean, it seems dangerous to bring your king out. So I think this is kind of going to be like an opponent I faced a couple rounds ago when rooks fly, who was also preparing quite a bit. I could tell, like many hours for that game against me. and they showed their preparation. You guys saw that one, if you want to rewind back a couple rounds. But I think this could be a similar type of game, is what I'm gathering. So if I play my Scandinavian, how much information do we have to go off of here? Because I always play the queen takes line. Now, I could play queen d8. And if they've looked at my games and know my history with the Scandinavian, they'll know that I do play that move sometimes. I've been writing a course on queen a5 for the past couple of years, so I've spent a lot of time looking at these lines. Do I want to play against this opponent in this variation? So here's a game where they face the Lionheart Gambit b4, in which case taking is correct. Although black has other moves too. You can even decline the pawn with queen b6 or even queen e5 if you want, which I analyze in my course, actually. So white has enough compensation for the pawn here, but it's barely enough. And there's many ways that really both sides can go wrong. I don't get the sense that they're going to play this way. And I think I would be comfortable playing against the Lionheart Gambit on the fly, even without reviewing my file, which I probably won't have time to review because we start in less than 20 minutes. So yeah, queen b6 is an option here. Queen e5, like I said, if you want to decline, is interesting that, yeah, I think this stuff is fine for black. This looks like an interesting game, actually, but this should be fine. So I'm not going to stress about b4. I can play against that on the fly if I need to, and I think I'll get a good position. So what about if white goes for something more mainline? So d4, knight f6. This is all per my course. Yeah, bishop d2 is common. Knight f3 is common. Bishop d2, I do recommend bishop g4 in my course. And there are some peculiarities to this type of line because the main line goes f3. You actually try to induce this weakening move f3, and then you retreat to d7. And you can keep your queen opposite this bishop because for the moment, white doesn't have any good discoveries. So often white goes bishop c4 here, threatening knight d5, and then black retreats with queen b6. So I could play this way without revealing the extent of my prep or what I've analyzed in the course. Yeah, I would feel okay doing this. So knight e2 is the main move here to defend the pawn. Yeah, I think I'd be okay with that. Let's go back to the position here. So I'm trying to give you guys as much information as I can, but I do have to be mindful that my future opponents are watching these videos more than likely, or will in the future. So, and also it's not really relevant to go too far down the exact lines that I theoretically might face in some of these openings, especially when the opponent hasn't even faced bishop g4. So suffice it to say, I'll retreat to d7 in a lot of these cases where white plays an early f3. Okay, so that's on bishop d2. What about knight f3, which is an utterly standard move? Bishop f5 is the move here. Yeah, knight e5. So this is one of the most dangerous lines against the Scandinavian. And they have a couple recent games. One against a bot. Ooh, 39 hours ago. Oh, that's a bit of a tip, isn't it? Interesting. So are they planning something in this line? Training buddy. Wow. Now I'm curious to look at all of the conversation here. I don't know, though. This could be, you know, something to throw me off, too. Maybe they have no intention of actually playing this way, but that is funny that they had this game under their profile, which they know I'm going to look at. Yeah, bishop d3. That's not actually the main move here, this bishop d3 move. So this is another line I think I would be okay with playing on site. Yeah, in fact, I think I remember analyzing this in the course. Bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight d5 castles, and then e6. And I think this is equal. I don't think there's anything special here for white. Black just plans bishop e7. You just can't take the bishop right away because you get checkmated. So I believe that's equal. So bishop d3, I wouldn't actually be that worried about, but there is some stuff here. White can try knight c4, for instance. Knight c4 hit the queen. Queen a6 is the move against this one. And you line up with the white queen. Yeah, queen e2, threatening knight d6, e6, bishop f4, and I think it's knight d5. Yep, knight d5, knight d6, take. You can get a position like this. I analyze all this in the course, and then castles. Castles, I believe. Or knight c3 first, and then castles. Yeah, that's right. Damage white's pawn structure. And I think this is pretty much equal, despite the broken structure that both sides have. So, yeah, there might be some lines that require me to remember my prep, which is fine. But against good players like this who have a lot of time to prepare, it is a risk. If you're playing your main opening that you're known for, your preparation has to be tight. But I don't honestly think that there's much to worry about in this particular variation that white might throw at me. I think this is totally fine. Yeah, e6 or knight takes e5. I think knight takes e5 is more direct. If they take with the bishop, I remember this knight g4 move hit the bishop. I think the engine likes this, and then e6, and just try to develop as normal from here. Okay, so that is very interesting to me that they played a training game in this exact line. And what about this game? This was played a month ago, so this probably isn't relevant. Okay, so this is one where black actually played this queen a6 move right away, but I think that's not as effective. But at least this gives me a bit of a read on what they might go for, if they want to go for this variation. I mean, maybe white's been doing a ton of work on the main line, which is bishop c4, e6, g4, bishop g6, h4. So there's a long main line that goes like this, and I won't rehash why these moves are played. You can check out my upcoming course. You get a position like this where white has the two bishops, and they've thrown their kingside pawns forward. The engine likes white in this position, but there have been many games from here, and I would say it's double-edged, because white is definitely weakening their king by playing this way. So, I'm leaning towards playing my queen a5 stuff, and if I end my prep a little early, I have a couple minutes to go check my files, specifically in this bishop d3 variation, that it appears like they have a preference for whatever reason. Like, this is not, I can say for sure this is not the most dangerous line white has against this opening. Question is, do I want to let them play their prep or not? But yeah, bishop c4, even g4. G4, I think, is more of a testing move here. On g4, black has to know to play bishop e6, actually, and not bishop g6. So there's some wrinkles there. So, yeah, I mean, I've mentioned that I like to end this preparation a little bit before the game starts, so leave myself 5-10 minutes. Just good to collect your thoughts in general, not have to go immediately from preparing to the game. At least give yourself a few minutes to, go get a drink, load up with the various drinks that I'm going to have for this game. But I might actually just quickly check my file too, because I could use a small refresher on those lines with knight e5, c6, and then bishop d3. So I think that's what I'm going to do. And I don't believe I'm going to look at much more. Maybe just real quick, I can see what they play against other lines. But we saw an open Sicilian. So, yeah, okay, they play knight a3 sometimes as white. I have nothing against that move. No preparation. I don't even think I'm going to look at other variations. I'm going to go Scandi, and we'll see what happens. I wanted to play at least one Scandinavian in this league, so we'll see what my opponent has in mind. I'm going to check my own file real quick. If I had more time, maybe I could do this on video, but I'll surely let you guys know if the game ends up going according to my prep. So, all right, let's wrap it up here. Looking forward to this game against some rapid player. All right, and here we go. Good luck to my opponent. Have fun. This is what, round 8? I feel like I always have to pause and think about what round it is. But yeah, round 8 of 11, Lone Wolf League, season 37. For some reason, I remember that number, season 37. My opponent, some rapid player, has the white pieces. I did do a little last-minute check on my file right before the game. So let's go ahead and play Scandinavian. Let's do it. Probably not a surprise for white. So I'm really curious what line they're going to throw at me. turn my volume up a little bit too. Yeah, knight c3, let's play queen a5. I briefly mentioned queen d8. That's a move that I played plenty in the past. I even wrote a course on Chessable for it. But I feel more comfortable playing my main stuff. And yeah, I'm just really genuinely curious what white's going to throw at me. Are we going to see that knight e5 line with bishop d3? Is white going to play something completely unusual? They do play e4, c5, knight a3, which is quite creative. But no, for the moment, white just plays knight f3. Let's go bishop f5. And I predict we're going to see knight e5. No, bishop d2. Okay, so this move is interesting. Now, without getting too deep into the historical background of this move, this is like a relatively recent move order twist. A lot of times in the past, black has played e6 here. But on e6, there's this dangerous move, knight e5. Knight to e5. So I actually like playing knight bd7 here, which is a move my opponent's probably not going to be too surprised by. But you can play it because there's no dangerous discovery yet for this knight. And I even mentioned something similar in the prep in a related line. But when white has not played bishop c4 yet, typically you don't have to panic or worry about some discovery against bishop d2. And if you're going to play this queen a5 Scandi, you have to be okay with the queen staring at that bishop on d2, or vice versa, the bishop looking at the queen on a5. Because there's a lot of circumstances where you're just chilling with your queen on that square. And as long as you manage the tactics, it's usually okay. So knight bd7. This is a big line I analyzed for my course. And it hasn't been played very much, honestly. This can transpose into other variations that have been played more. But this little twist in this exact position, this is not something that I believe has been really pontificated upon in Scandinavian courses or literature yet. So maybe I can pioneer this line. It's just a little twist. It's nothing major. But if white was hoping for e6, knight e5, that's at least going to mess up their hopes there. Okay, they play b4. So yeah, this indicates to me that they might have looked at this line, because b4 is interesting. And this is a variation where some weird stuff can happen. So I think I'm supposed to play queen b6 here. I don't believe you're supposed to take the pawn, because then rook b1. Actually, knight b5 is an issue. So let's play queen b6 pretty quickly. And I do remember there are some ways white can try to expand. Yeah, okay, so white has looked at this. They've definitely prepped for this game, which is fun. I mean, we're gonna see what white can throw at me with their prep. So advancing aggressively on the queen side. Yeah, this is not a line I reviewed before the game, that's for sure. But I do remember a little bit of stuff. So a4 stands to reason you want to try to advance on the queen side and give the queen some space. There's various ideas, though. So sometimes queen e6 might come into play. Sometimes you can actually ignore what white is doing, as weird as that looks. So I think a6 or c6 are my main moves here that I would consider. But I'm going to pause here for a moment just to make sure that I'm remembering this position correctly. I don't remember exactly what I have in my file on this move, but I remember it being fine for black, but it could get a little odd. So a6 or c6. So if I play c6, a5, and then retreat the queen, white can try to play a6 and maybe claim that the pawn on c6 is a weakness. That could potentially be their argument later. So a6, a4, queen a7 is a possibility, but it looks a little passive. Not sure I want to go down that road. c6 is definitely on the surface just the safest move to play here. I think that's for sure. Give the queen some outs. So a6, c6. Don't think there's too many other moves I would consider at the moment. C6 is definitely the most human move here, I would say, because it's just nice to have your queen being able to retreat all the way. But I also know my opponent probably will have looked at that move. But that doesn't mean, I don't necessarily want to play it still, but just something to keep in mind. So A6, C6 rather, A5, and then queen D8 or queen C7. Both look interesting. I suppose queen C7, probably. So C6, A5, queen C7. And if A6, probably B5 in that exact position. So C6, A5, queen C7, A6, B5. I believe is okay. But I also don't think white will play C6, A5, queen C7, A6. I think they're going to play something like bishop C4 first, or maybe B5 even, whereupon I'll probably just develop. But I'm pausing because I don't recall if I actually want to play C6 in this position, but I can't describe why. So I should probably just play C6 because it looks normal, looks fine. Maybe white will just go B5 and continue pushing. And I don't want to eat up too much time in this position. It's still pretty early. Long term, white's trying to get some sort of clamp on the queen side. They might try to run me over, but I think more likely they're just going to try to get a clamp of some sort. So yeah, let's go ahead and play C6. It's a normal Scandinavian move. So yep, A5 played. And now queen C7 or queen D8. Queen C7 is usually the move you want to play in a situation like this. So probably I will go for that. Queen D8 a little more passive, but there are some advantages to playing queen D8 in that the queen is just safer on that square. If you think bishop F4 is ever a thing, you might want to play queen D8. But I do think queen C7 is normal. And I seem to recall sometimes white goes knight A4 to C5 in this type of position, maybe in the middle game. But I also remember there's some knight E4 counterplay if white ever does that. So right now I'm just trying to mentally figure out if there's a reason not to play queen C7. Because if there isn't, I'm just going to go for it. Yeah, I don't really see a reason not to. So when white has played b4, after I play queen c7 and then hopefully get to play e6 next, I will be hitting this pawn on b4. That is a thing. But also there's some cases where queen d8, I remember in this line being kind of useful. The queen just being a little more protected back there. But again, I can't really articulate why that is. So I think I should just play the human move. Let's go queen c7. Bishop f4 is not a thing. White could prep it with g3, but e6, bishop f4, I'm in time to play bishop d6. And again, when I play e6, white's got to start thinking about bishop takes b4. So the meta game, right? It's really interesting, I think, for you guys to see my preparation, because I believe some rapid player threw in that 95 line, that training game, because they knew I was going to look at that. And that was just misinformation, you know? Little deflection. So a6, yeah, white grabbing space. So I mentioned b5, but now I'm also remembering that I think you can ignore this, and I think you can play e6 and just let white go ahead and take and try to play against this b4 point. I think that's actually a pretty reasonable option. So candidate moves here, e6, just ignoring the attack, b6 and b5. think those are about the only moves I would consider in this position. So if e6, a takes b7, queen takes b7, I'm on this pawn. White could play bishop a6. Somehow the move queen b8 sticks out in my head against that, keeping the queen and the bishop both trained on the b pawn. You don't want to take the b pawn with your queen yet, because knight b5 is still an issue. But somehow that's sticking out in my head. e6, take, queen takes, bishop a6, queen b8. And then also somehow the move queen b1 sticks out in my head too. Which is funny, because none of these moves are exactly natural in a normal Scandinavian. So e6, yeah, b6, b5. If b5, I'm not exactly afraid of a sacrifice, but maybe white tries for a quick d5. Tries to break up that structure ASAP. That looks kind of interesting. I mean, this is a very modern, like, engine type way of playing chess, this quick advance of the rook pawn. So could play b5. I don't think there's anything imminently wrong with that move, but I'm not so sure about d5, if white plays d5 in reply. And let's say knight takes d5. So d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, c takes d5. Then there might be something like knight d4, hit the bishop, and also try to get in knight takes b5. So I'm thinking I should probably just play e6 and be okay with white slightly messing up my queen side, but I know that that's okay in this type of position. I think that's actually fine. And the benefit of e6 is I get an absolute grip on the d5 square. So I think that's the direction I'm going to go. Yeah, let's play it. Trying to be mindful of the time, because white did surprise me with this whole variation, and I don't want to fall too far behind on the clock. Oh yeah, drink check. We've been so busy with the position, I haven't done a drink check. So I've got my lemon ginger tea, and I also have some Starbucks dark roast. Got a bit of a late start this morning. Slept in a bit. So I'm still drinking my coffee, caffeinated this time. Okay, and white plays b5. So white's just going after me here on the queen side. They're trying to knock me out, folks, right away. So b5. So I could continue developing bishop d6 and just let white do their thing with all the captures. But, you know, stands to reason I might want to dodge some of the potential captures coming. So c5 comes to mind. But bishop d6 looks very solid. Maybe bishop b4 even, but bishop d6 looks pretty normal here. Just let white kind of do their thing on the queen side. Bishop d6, a takes b7, queen takes b7, b takes c6, queen takes c6. What then? Probably bishop b5 with tempo. Maybe I just step back. I don't know. That position looks fine to me. That looks okay. So what's really in store if I play bishop d6? I just develop. Is it something like bishop d6, a takes b6, queen takes b6, rook a6 maybe? That's probably it. Because then I'm in alignment on the 6th rank. Yeah, I could see that being a bit dangerous, because knight a6, white takes on c6 with their pawn. Yeah. Okay, so I think I've sniffed out what they're up to here. Bishop d6, take, rook a6 with this alignment. So if not bishop d6, c5 definitely comes to mind, like I said. Am I scared of something like b6 against that? It's a thought. Could develop my bishop elsewhere too. So something like bishop b4, as I mentioned, or maybe bishop e7. Bishop b4 actually looks kind of interesting to me, to put a little bit of counter pressure on that knight. I think that's a valid reaction. Bishop b4, a takes b7, queen takes b7. Because then rook a6, it takes a lot of the sting out of the rook a6 move. It just doesn't make sense for white to do that. Maybe they go for some fianchetto of the bishop, but that seems kind of slow. So thinking bishop b4 might be a decent move here. White could perhaps react with queen b1 against that. But maybe c5 then? Or just take. Bishop b4, queen b1, take, and then take on b5. That gets weird. I guess they have bishop b4 there, but I think that should be fine for me. So bishop b4, maybe bishop e7 has some value too. Just looking to complete development, castle. But bishop b4 seems a little more active and useful, I would say. Bishop b4. Kind of threatening to take the knight, really. And if white wants to take b7, I take with the queen. Could still play rook b1, I suppose, but then maybe c5. c5 starts to look good there, I think. So as of now, I think bishop b4 is probably what I'm going to go for. Just try to develop, you know, just try to keep pace development-wise while white is spending a lot of time advancing these pawns, which looks scary, admittedly, but I trust in the solidity of the Scandinavian formation, you know? The bishop's undefended, but again, I can always take the knight, or if the knight moves somehow with the discovery, I can take the bishop with check. So I do like the look of this bishop b4 move. So bishop b4, take b7, queen takes b7. Let's say c takes b5, queen takes, or b takes c6, queen takes c6, bishop b5. I think I just pull the queen back, queen c7. I'm on the knight twice. Yeah, that looks good. Rook b1, queen b1 stuff, rook a4. I think I could deal with that. That all looks all right. Don't think b6 is a threat. Just seems very unlikely that b6 is ever going to work. So bishop b4, a takes b7, queen takes b7, rook a6. Against that, I'm taking on b5. And remember, with bishop b4, I'm ready to castle pretty quickly, so I think I like the looks of that. Yeah, let's go bishop b4. So spending a lot of time, my opponent appears to be in prep still, which is good prep by them. You know, this is what having a target on your back in chess is sort of about. And I welcome the challenge. You know, I want people to challenge me in the opening I'm known for. Hey, there's a chance I could lose a game like this. Absolutely. Against a good player who's prepped a lot, clearly. And, you know, trying to surprise me. But that's how we evolve in our understanding and get better as players, too. So once again, I'm still very curious how this is going to develop. It's kind of hard to forecast middle games in a position like this. So I think this is the type of line that white prepares, not in the pure hopes of a knockout in the opening, but it's very targeted prep, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think this is a line where you pull up a bunch of model games and try to analyze like the common pawn structures that might result, because this is just weird. You know, look at white's last 4 moves, a4, a5, a6, b5. Meanwhile, I'm trying to play Scandinavian normal type moves. So This strategy can work sometimes, like preparing a very specific and sharp line, but eventually, if your preparation doesn't hit exactly, you got to play on your own. And that's where the real chess can begin. Yeah, I think I'm happy with this bishop b4 move. And bishop d6, something in my head with takes rook a6 looks familiar. So when I go back and look at my file after this game, I'm going to see if that was in there. And bishop b4, something with queen b1 around here looks familiar too. But I don't know. White's already got to think pretty concretely because queen b1, I take the knight, I take b5, I hit their bishop. Maybe they can go bishop b4 there. That also sticks in my head, trying to prevent black from castling. But there's stuff with bishop takes c2 as well White has to be worried about. I don't know. We'll find out. Oh, yeah. So I didn't include my last beverage. So I've got the lemon ginger tea, the dark roast from Starbucks, which is actually quite good. I recommend the dark roast. And then I've got my water as well. Thanks, everyone, for following this series. It's really been pretty fun and getting tougher and tougher every game. I feel like the preparation aspect is getting more intense with each passing encounter. And many of you have actually joined the leagues, by the way, this Lone Wolf League, the 45 plus 45 League. So shout out to those of you who have joined or are going to join for a future season. It's really, really good for your chess. So it's comforting that White is finally thinking. It's unpleasant when your opponent's blitzing out a sharp line, caught you by surprise. But I have the knowledge of knowing that this is inherently fine for black. So I think I've handled this well correctly. Took me some time, but I think I've handled this well so far. I'm just quite simply looking to castle. And at some point, I think the queenside situation will be resolved. But in the short term, just preparing castling. Maybe I would consider, let's say White played something totally neutral like bishop e2. Not totally neutral, but just a developing move. I might consider taking on c3 and then taking on b5 to hit the bishop. But I also might just want to castle, get my king to safety, and go from there. Today, there's a bunch of games in the league. We're playing on a Sunday, which is the last day of the week that you can play these games, because the pairings come out on Monday. And you're supposed to wrap your games up by the end of day on Sunday, I believe. So I think the top 5 boards are all playing today. It'll be interesting to check out the results afterwards. So big moving day for Lone Wolf League Season 37. Really hard to know what White's going to play here. I mean, if I were to guess, probably A takes B7. But maybe something to B1 as well. It's hard to generalize too much about this position because it could change very quickly with these trades. This rook a4 move is sort of interesting, but even concretely, rook a4, bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, c takes b5, hits the bishop on c3 with my queen, discovery, and hits the rook. So White would have to play rook a3 there. I think even if I just castled that at some point, I don't see black being worse there ever. So that's something White has to think about. Now, remember, we did see in that Sicilian game that this player lost to, was it JWG2? They blitzed out a bunch of preparation, got a good position, but then pretty quickly went off the rails in an unusual setup. So you guys remember that one? That was the game with king e2, king f3 by some rapid player. So I'm fully open to the fact that something like that could happen, where they play a bunch of, sharp, impressive looking preparation very quickly. But as long as we avoid disaster, we're going to be playing a game where anything could happen. And in a sharp position, they might get disoriented. Yeah, I mean, again, I think a takes b7 is the move I'd be most likely to play here, just to deflect the queen, really. Because I think if you don't play a takes b7, you always have to think about that trade and then take on b5 with the loose bishop. But on a takes b7, how are just mass trades not happening here? I think the take on c6 is likely after that, sometime in the near future. Queen takes c6. Then we're in a scenario where black has a passed a pawn. But is it a strength or a weakness? I mean, I think it could go either way. Still kind of dynamic, though. I'm closer to castling than white is at this point, because they need 2 moves in order to castle, whereas I just need 1 move. So I don't quite see the danger at this point for me, which is a dangerous thing to say when we're just 1 move out of a line that they've been blitzing so far. But I think avoiding bishop d6, a takes b7, queen takes b7, rook a6 was a big thing, because if they prepped this far, they almost certainly would have looked at some possibility like that. And I think that's where things could have quickly got rough for me. That position probably is much worse for black. "25 players watching this game. Thanks everyone for spectating live. You can check out the LoneWolf website, by the way, if you want to see real time when these games are being played. I know a lot of you guys like to watch the recording, be surprised by the result from the recording. But if you do want to watch them live, they post all the pairings and what times the games are being played throughout the week. Yeah, it's actually funny. It shows the spectator list in the bottom left corner. My webcam is covering it up, but I see a lot of players who are league regulars. Susie Dent, Transu, Sid Fan DX. Yeah, a lot of players I recognize from the Slack channel and people who've streamed these games, stuff like that. Antazi, I think Antazi is one of the top players in the Lone Wolf League right now. Maybe tied for first. All right. Yeah, I'm really trying to figure out what I can add to this position, but I'm also just trying to stay loose, like ready for any transformation. Again, the position is so volatile with the exchanges possible. I don't think it's tactically volatile yet, but it's just subject to change very quickly with the structural considerations white has to make. And white is the one for now who controls how this structure could evolve, given that I have not taken any of these pawns yet. But now white has to wonder, am I actually going to try to drive the bus here and maybe take and try to get that discovery? So white takes on b7 makes a lot of sense. Yeah, take with the queen. Probably could have pre-moved that move, but whatever. I'll pre-move this one. Queen takes c6, because it's only going to register if they play b takes c6, and I'm definitely not doing anything else against that. Maybe they'll consider rook a6 still in this position with the idea of, let's say, c takes b5, knight takes b5. I could see that being a consideration, trying to get some sort of quick grip on the queen side. But then I can trade on d2, queen takes d2, castles. Maybe there's knight d6 or something there, but white's got to worry about their development. They're going to be quickly running the risk of being behind in development if they're not careful. But that looks like something, if they're trying to play in very principled fashion, that maybe the computer would like. Still rook, b takes c6, queen takes c6. Or sorry, still rook a6, I should say, from this position. So rook a6, bishop takes c3. Could they throw in b takes c6 at that point? Have bishop takes d2 check. I don't think that's that great for them. Again, I always believe if white's 2 moves away from castling and I've already castled, that I shouldn't be worse in a scenario like that. So rook a6, b takes c6. Probably 2 most likely moves here. Also on rook a6, I can think about c5. Pawn to c5. That move looks very interesting to me. Just advance past, attack the center. It opens the h1, a8 diagonal. So maybe white could think about g3, bishop g2 there. But again, they're behind in development. I could always take their knight and play bishop e4, something along those lines. And now I'm actually up on the clock. So 2 very long thinks here by white. That's one thing when you have time to prepare for games, or you just face someone who's well prepared and happens to know the opening that you're playing in great detail, maybe even more than you. Don't panic when they're just whipping out those moves. The faster the time control, the harder it is not to panic. But you have to keep telling yourself that at some point, you're just going to be playing a chess game. Okay, you might get knocked out in the opening sometimes. That is a possibility. That could go to the quality of your repertoire and just how sharp you want to be playing with your chosen repertoire. But almost always at some point, your opponent's going to have to pause and start thinking independently. You can't get too doomerish about, you can't just conjure up in your head all these ways you can lose in the opening because your opponent seems to know it. Sometimes they might even be bluffing, by the way. But just tell yourself they're going to have to play independently at some point. Try to be safe. If you want to err on the side of caution, you can do that. That's okay. But the main thing is not to lose your head, is why I'm bringing this up, because that's a very common scenario in competitive chess, particularly when there's this preparation aspect and both sides have time to prepare for the game in advance of it. So I pre-move the capture, but I don't think white's going to play it. I think they're going to play something different. Because dare I say, after the capture, it almost feels like they're losing some momentum with the attack on the knight on c3. I know they have bishop b5 with tempo, but that only temporarily solves the issues with the loose knight. But if they don't play b takes c6, it really stands to reason what other move are they going to play? rook a6 maybe, like I've been speculating. But rook a6, I have, I think, two nice options between c takes b5 and c5, maybe, pawn to c5. Hope the new mic is sounding better. And thanks again to one of our viewers, Kevin. Kevin was a big help. He mentioned a couple videos ago, like, hey, John, you're having a lot of audio distortion. In fairness, several other people mentioned it too. But he actually sent me an email with some recommended tweaks that I might consider to try to improve the situation. And we had multiple back and forths, actually, where I was trying his suggestions. And unfortunately, it wasn't improving. And after my last video, I think I moved the mic at some point, and it just cut out for a period of time. Fortunately, it didn't cut out for the entire video, but, and a couple of you picked up on this, but when I moved the mic, adjusted it in my mic stand, there were one or two moments in that video where it cut out for a period of time. And in his opinion, that probably just meant I needed a new mic versus it being a cable issue. And I think that turned out to be spot on, because this mic has been working amazingly pretty much right out of the box. It's a Shure SM7DB. And it also gave me a chance to update my audio interface. I have this big audio interface that I was previously using with a bunch of knobs that I only have a vague understanding of. And I was able to simplify things quite a bit. I bought this small connector device. It's called an MVX2U, I think, also a Shure product. And it allows you to control the audio interface right from your desktop versus on this external unit that I was using before, where it had all the knobs and stuff. So for me, as someone who's not hugely tech literate when it comes to this level of specificity with audio stuff, which is a total rabbit hole, by the way, Kevin's suggestions were a big help. And thanks to Kevin for really helping me manage this audio situation. Fingers crossed that this lasts, at least a couple years. Okay, wow, long think by white here. I was going to make some comment to the effect that it's okay that we're thinking for this long in the opening still, but I don't know, these two moves, if white just ends up taking twice on c6 and then playing bishop b5, it's going to feel like a little bit of a letdown for them, I think. It's hard for me to criticize anyone's time usage because we know that I've been in time pressure in plenty of these games in the league so far. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm thinking they probably will take on c6, because the longer they think, the less sure they are about any further sharp way they can play this. So I think taking on c6, bishop b5, queen c7, let's say, I think that's kind of an admission that black is at least equal. But how can white really justify other moves here? Maybe that queen b1 move? Again, queen b1 sticks out in my head as a theme in this line to hit the bishop. Yeah, and they do take on c6. Got my pre-move in there. Very nice. I mean, I don't know. Are they going to go for something sharp here? d5? Not sure I quite buy that. I would think bishop b5 is likely. Just try to develop with tempo. I can't really play queen takes c3, can I? Nah. Try to get two pieces and then fork the king and the rook. Probably not going to work. Their queen is defending the rook on a1 at the end. They could play rook a6 here, by the way. Hit the queen. I can't play knight b6 in reply because of bishop b5. So rook a6, I'll probably play queen b7, I imagine. Yeah, I think I might have mentioned that line. Rook a6, queen b7. Maybe it was with rook a6 right away, but rook a6, queen b7, knight b5. Bishop takes d2, queen takes d2. They go knight e5. Oh, interesting. So idea here, knight takes e5, there's bishop b5. So I can't take the knight. That's the first thing about that move that stands out. But I can play queen b7, I think. I think queen b7 makes sense. Probably not queen c7, because queen c7 invites knight b5. Let's just double check. Knight takes e5, bishop b5. There's no way to make that work, right? Don't have any checks. Queen is pinned. Yeah, so that's out. I didn't see knight e5 in this position, so that is a tempo gaining move. But appears to be still fine. Queen b7. And if bishop a6, then queen takes g2 probably. So queen b7. White could pin me. Bishop b5, I suppose. Idea castles, bishop c6. Although there, maybe queen c7. Idea bishop takes a8, bishop takes c3 even is interesting. That also seems familiar from my file. Probably not this exact position, but something like it. So queen b7, I think, is the move I'm going to play here. And I like it because it stays aligned with this pawn on g2. That's the thing that appeals to me about this move. By the way, I'm trying to be conservative with my arrow drawing and circling and stuff, because you'd hate for a mouse slip to just ruin these games. So queen b7. Well, I could try bishop e2 maybe, trying to get the bishop to f3. But I don't know. I think with bishop takes c3 and putting something on e4, I should always be fine there. I don't foresee too many difficulties. So queen b7, if rook b1, I can play a5 or maybe just castle right away. So I think I may go queen b7 pretty quickly here. And it makes sense. Again, it makes sense to keep the queen on this long diagonal. Stops white from getting frisky with queen f3. Yeah, I don't see any issues with it. Because we definitely can't take the knight. Taking the knight would be fine if they had to take back with the pawn, but that bishop b5 move spoils things. So queen b7. Yeah, bishop e2. I can always take c3. I don't see that being a problem. Queen b7, bishop a6, queen takes g2. I don't buy that for white either. They might go queen b7, knight b5, but take, castle. Yeah, let's do it. Queen b7 it is. Try to retain this time advantage. So I'm still just trying to castle. Now I suppose I could think about taking the knight on e5 next if I'm allowed, but mostly I'm trying to castle, I believe. Castling just solves so many of my issues tactically, whisking that king away to safety. Maybe white will think about queen f3 in some situation just to try to swap. But again, that feels like an admission that you don't have much if you play queen f3. Also leaves c2 weak in the end. Probably I still need to castle to make any of that work, but yeah, I mean, this is the double-edged nature of lines like this. So for sure in the opening, it looked like white, kind of had a gotcha, like, hey, I caught you in a line that you didn't think I was going to play against you. But it goes both ways. This is for sure the first time white is playing this line. This whole thing with b4, a4, a5, b5, a6. It's extravagant. And I've been more or less playing by basic principles, I think. Not trying to overreact to this. And I don't think white has a frame of reference for this, is what I'm getting at. Doesn't mean I'm better, doesn't mean I'm going to win, but it feels nice having avoided any danger straight out of the opening. And now maybe this position's more difficult to play as white. It sort of seems that way to me. I wonder if they're going to play something like rook b1, castles, and then bishop e2. Because if they play bishop e2, I don't think I can justify queen takes g2, as it runs into bishop f3 when they hit my queen, defend the rook on h1, and hit the rook in the corner. So they're probably going to look to do something like that. Maybe bishop e2 right away. But then they have to calculate what happens if bishop takes c3, knight takes e5, d takes e5, and then my knight jumps to the center somewhere, knight d5, let's say, hit the bishop. Maybe they could play bishop d4 there, but then there's queen b4, c2 is loose. I'm not 100% sure about that line for white. So I think they might have to try to somehow organize castling pretty quickly. And bishop e2 seems like the way to do it, so that queen takes g2 can always be met by bishop f3. Knight takes d7, by the way, I'm probably taking with the knight. They could do that iteration too. Knight takes d7, then bishop e2. Threatening bishop f3. Yeah, I have to take with the knight, by the way. Queen takes d7 still runs into bishop b5. So, might even want to remove that. I think I will. Could they think about bishop b5 here? Bishop b5, bishop takes c3, bishop c6. Doesn't seem like it should work. Bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, queen c8. Yeah, they take. It's sort of fizzling out in terms of excitement, like pure excitement because of these trades. But I think these trades made sense for both sides. Yeah, bishop b2. So probably sensible, honestly, just trying to make way for castling. And again, queen takes g2, bishop f3 is the thing. So, okay, so now the question, do I take on c3 or do I maybe play rook c8 is a move that comes to mind? Try to attack that knight on c3 again. I think rook c8 would be more principled here. Hit that pony on c3. But rook c8, knight b5, perhaps, huh? Because then something like bishop takes c2, I think white could even play bishop takes b4 with knight d6 on deck. So, yeah, I might want to play bishop takes c3. Gives up the bishop pair, but then I could just castle. And with the rook coming to c8, I don't know, that looks pretty nice. Pretty nice for me. I feel like that c2 pawn could be an issue for white pretty quickly here. And the advantage of taking on c3, by the way, is that I can always meet bishop f3 with bishop e4 in the future. So that'd be the argument for playing that way. Take, castles. Well, I guess, okay, to be precise, in that scenario, let's say castles and let's say white castles. I can't play rook c8 because I run into bishop a6. with the skewer. So I could maybe play queen c8. But yeah, it's important to put a fine point on that. I don't think I'm ready to play rook c8 in those lines, nor in general yet. This bishop's a bit annoying because it can operate both ways. It's maybe an argument for playing a5 if I get a chance, but for the moment I need to take care of this bishop to f3 idea. So take, castles, castles. Let's say queen c7 at that point. Queen c7, bishop b4, bishop takes c2 maybe. Queen d2. That could be a little dangerous, I think, because I might get caught in the crossfire with their bishops. So we'll table that. I'll think about that, but maybe I hold off on bishop takes c3. Could also think of bishop takes c3, castles, castles, f3. Bishop e4, rather, trying to induce f3. That is intriguing. I would prefer not to play bishop takes c3 right away, because I do like that pressure that I have on the knight. But again, in view of bishop f3, it seems like I may have to play that way soon, regardless. I mean, maybe I can justify castles, bishop f3, queen c8 or something to hit the knight. Bishop takes a8, bishop takes c3. But then there's rook takes a7. I'm not sure. Not 100% sure. So right now I'm leaning towards bishop takes c3, castles. Castle short, that is. Definitely not castling long. And then white castles. And then, yeah, it's hard to say. Queen c7 maybe? But queen c7, rook, bishop b4 is a bit annoying. So maybe bishop e4. Bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3. Castles, castles, bishop e4. Really try to induce that f3 move. f3 and then maybe even bishop d5 in that scenario. Try to grasp onto the c4 square. That looks interesting. Bishop g6 also comes to mind. Also a bit of a hedge against white playing d5 and trying to open up the center. Yeah, so takes, castles, probably the direction I'm leaning here. I feel like there's probably another way to play, but it would cost me some time to figure it out. And I like what I'm working with in this other line. It's just that annoying light square bishop. If I could get rid of that, trade for that, that would be a dream. But in the meantime, I think I'm okay with proceeding as I've described here. Take, castles, castles. Bishop e4, f3. Then it's a close call. Bishop g6 or bishop d5. I think both moves have some merit. Maybe bishop g6. But okay, let's be practical. Let's take. Bishop f3 right away. That would be a big mistake because I can take with check. So we're not going to do that. Yeah, let's castle. And I would expect white to follow suit. So white does have the two bishops and connected d and c pawns, but their bishop on c3, this is kind of common to the Scandinavian, this is not the best placed piece for white because it interferes with their ability to connect their pawns together. It's kind of a tall pawn on c3. So that's a big aspect of what's going on in this position. And I do have the a pawn. Again, this is a pass pawn. It's probably more of a weakness right now, but maybe later on it could be useful. So white does castle. Yeah, and I really like the look of this bishop e4 move the more I stare at this, because hits the pawn on g2. White does not want to play f3 and deprive themselves of the bishop f3 resource, but it's looking like they might have to do that. And then I can perhaps maneuver my knight into the mix. White does still have a grip on the queen side, but I do like the look of this position. The immediate knight b6 is also another move I could think about here. Oh, you know what? Why can't I play rook ac8 and then on bishop f3, then play bishop e4? What's wrong with that? It invites a forcing line, takes, rook takes a7, but then I can play rook takes c2, rook takes c3 rather, rook takes d7, and then take on c2. That probably fizzles out to a draw though, doesn't it? Oh, no, I can't play rook c8 because of bishop a6. Yeah, we already established that. I could play a6 maybe. Could maybe think about that, but pawn could become a target on a6 too. I'd prefer to keep it on a7, where it's a little more protected. So the question is on bishop e4, f3, do I play the bishop to g6 or d5? It's honestly a little hard to say. I'm thinking maybe d5. But if I play it to d5, it's imperative that I stop white from playing c4 at some point. That is a pretty important aspect. Well, let's play it. It's the move I had in mind, and let's just throw it at white, make them think. They're almost certainly going to play f3, but I don't want to fall into this habit where I'm just refraining from playing the only move that I'm really seriously considering. So let's think on their time. f3, bishop d5, or bishop g6? Bishop g6, I keep my bishop trained against the pawn on f2. But I can't help think that the bishop is more useful on d5. But it really hinges on being able to stop them from playing c4. That's the thing about playing bishop d5. So I lose some influence in this direction, but I gain some influence on the c4 square and just having my bishop be more multi-purpose in general. So bishop d5, maybe queen d2, queen c6 perhaps, or knight b6. Knight b6 maybe. Bishop g6 feels more ambitious, but bishop d5 feels smarter. That's what I'm debating here. To be smart or be ambitious? Why not both? Okay, you can't have everything. Bishop g6. Bishop g6 preparing queen b6. It's still annoying that I can't play a rook to c8 in those lines. That is still irritating, but we have to live with that. Once I play queen c7, then I can think about playing the queen to, or a rook to c8. So one thing I'm noticing too, if I play bishop g6, it may be hard for white to move their c-pawn later because my bishop's going to be controlling b1. Feels like that control of b1 could be helpful. So now I'm leaning back towards bishop g6. Bishop g6, let's say queen d2. Queen d2, queen c7 maybe. I could play something like rook f to c1. I start maneuvering my knight. They can pin me. Trying to go for c4. Yeah, they might achieve c4 in that circumstance. Maybe, maybe. Bishop g6, queen d2. Knight b6. Yeah, my knight doesn't have a great square to latch onto, which bishop d5 does help with that. Bishop d5, queen d2, even queen c6 maybe starts to look interesting there. Yeah, now I'm leaning back towards bishop d5. Really close call, though, here. Very, very close call. Let's choose one. Let's go bishop d5. I don't want to, again, fall into bad habits debating two very similar looking moves. So we'll play this. But like I said, it's going to be imperative that I prevent white from playing c4 going forward. I do not want to allow c4. Super duper important. Maybe later if white plays c4, but I'm otherwise coordinated, it's okay. But in the short term, I don't want white getting that pawn advance. Yeah, it does feel like maybe having control of c4 better is going to be helpful in the future. Even in a dream scenario where I can trade light square bishops, that would be really, really nice. It is unfortunate that I don't have that pressure on c2 as much anymore. So this is a more stabilizing move, but also it takes off some heat from the white position. Yeah, so queen d2, and I think I was considering queen c7 at this point. Queen c7, bishop b4, let's say, and then maybe rook f to b8, perhaps. Rook f to b8. And if rook a6, maybe bishop c4 then. Then there's bishop d6, though. So queen c7, bishop b4. Maybe I throw in rook ac8 first, try to bait them into playing bishop a6, and only then play rook f to b8. c3, I'm okay with c3 being played, I think. That's fine. Then maybe I can go bishop c4 or something. So queen c7, direction I'm thinking about here. Maybe they'll go rook a3, who knows? But I think it makes sense. Keep the knight flexible. Yeah, let's play it. So I gave back a lot of my time there, but I think the position is fine. If I were to guess, this is probably still equal, close to equal. I think white found a good sequence here with knight e5, takes, bishop e2, castles. They checked their ambitions and just tried to get coordinated, which made a lot of sense. We got to respect the bishop pair. The bishop pair is still powerful in a position like this. No doubt. So with this last move of mine, I'm looking to play a rook to c8 when I don't get hit by bishop a6, because I could play queen takes c3 then. Also stepping off the b file in case white wants to hit me with tempo. Bishop a5, okay. So I was thinking knight b6 against this move. Because knight b6 of c4, I'm pretty sure I can play knight takes c4. Pretty sure. No reason I shouldn't be able to. So maybe they'll go knight b6, rook fc1, but then I have a chance to play bishop c4 if I want. That should not be worse. So maybe they'll think about knight b6, bishop b4. Some finagling with the bishop, but it always seems like my knight can kind of harass them. So yeah, liking knight b6. It invites trades for sure, but I think these trades should ultimately be kind of equal. Yeah, let's play it. Try to stay above 5 minutes for now. So again, oh, and white just trades down. Really? I'm surprised. That doesn't seem very ambitious. They had me pinned. I guess they really are concerned about me using that c4 square. But yeah, I'm surprised. Okay, so I'll probably take with the a pawn here. Trying to figure out what construction they're going for. Maybe something with queen b4, but c2 is always weak. Wow, very surprised by this, but let's keep it flowing, keep it moving. I don't think I want to take with the a pawn because that invites rook a6 and some doubling. Yeah, let's take with the b pawn. My rook on a8 is defended a couple times. So can I start thinking about maybe getting an advantage somehow now? Maybe. I mean, white's structure looks a little looser than mine, so maybe, but let's just play the position as it comes. Very surprised by that, though. They took that knight instantly, so that indicates that they must have really been worried about bishop c4 or maybe just the knight in general. But yeah, that was not a move I expected. Maybe the narrative of the last several moves, once white had those big thinks in the opening, is maybe they sort of decided they weren't better and just wanted to play it safe and more or less coordinate trade, which I get. Try to avoid getting in time pressure. But I also like that turn of events for me. I will take that. So if c4, I can probably take the pawn. Because even if I get pinned, there's this b5 move. Not to mention there's stuff with rook takes a1, but c4 takes, let's say white, I don't know, trades rooks and then plays rook c1. I always have b5. Queen b4, rook c8. White's going to be suffering down a pawn there. So if they're hoping to get in c4, I don't think that's going to work. At least yet. And if they can't get in c4, I mean, maybe I plug the bishop on this square. And I think in a heavy piece ending, even though we both have two pawn islands, I got to believe with white's c2 pawn still being disconnected from the d pawn, white having played f3, their king's a little loose. I got to believe I'm slightly better in that scenario, maybe clearly better. Even on time. Wow. Yeah, I'm doing a lot of eyebrow raising here, guys. I think it's pretty clear white's trying to trade and force some peaceful resolution here. But does this work? Can't I just take this pawn? Or trade rooks and then take? Just very, very surprised that they chose this route. So do I want to take on c4 first or trade rooks and then take? May not matter that much. I think they're pretty similar. But I'm also trying to figure out if I'm missing something big picture. But I can't believe, even if white pins me with this b5 move, I mean, worst case scenario, I have to give the pawn back, and white still has an isolated pawn. Right? So it seems very, very unlikely that I'm ever going to be worse in a scenario like that. So I think taking on c4 is the obvious thing. Just a question, do I want to trade a pair of rooks first? So if I take c4, rook a, c1, b5, queen b4, something like rook f to c8 looks just fine. Work up to, I don't know, rook a4 after that. Double rooks. It feels more correct to not trade rooks, not give white the file. But either way, should be clear to take this pawn. This is a what am I missing moment. And I don't think I'm missing anything. I think white's just either miscalculated or just trying to play purely for a draw. So if I take c4, take a8, take rook c1, b5, I don't know. I don't know what they're going for with that. Okay, let's take. Queen c3, okay. So b5. There's also rook c8, rook a to c8, but b5 got to be correct. Let's do it. Take. Okay. So one or two rooks on board. Same call. Same, not dilemma, but same thing I'm debating here. You know, usually when you're up material, you want to trade down, but I don't want white getting that file for no reason. So that's why I'm hesitating just ever so slightly. They're very similar, though. You can think about queen takes as well. But I think keeping queens on board actually makes sense here because it's going to prevent white's king from coming up so quickly. That's a major advantage to that. Let's take with a pawn. All right, we're playing for a win, folks. Let's try to make it happen. Heavy piece ending. I've got an extra pawn. If I'm counting right, 5 versus 4. And white still has those lingering weaknesses, the pawn on d4 especially, but also don't sleep on white having played f3, that move I induced with bishop e4 several moves ago. That can hurt white's king safety. Yeah, I think white's just trading down and hoping for the best here, but questionable strategy for sure. Just a bad strategy, I mean, to be blunt. But I still got to prove it. This is still not going to be simple. Rook b1. Okay, so this is where making Luft for my king would make a lot of sense. I do see there's rook b5, though. I have to keep that move in mind. So maybe I want to play queen c6 first, just to prevent rook b5. I think that would make sense. Queen c6, rook b4, rook c8. Bit of a standoff there. They can maybe start bringing their king in, but I can gradually make progress, I think, from that position. Too early for rook b8. So yeah, I think I like queen c6. Although I don't know, rook c8, rook b5, and then queen d6 or something also looks pretty reasonable. But usually in a situation like this, you want to take away the opponent's counterplay first. So I think queen c6 looks good. Rook b4, rook c8, just sit on that position. They're blockading with their queen, which could be potentially annoying for them. Because if ever the queen moves, my pawn might start running. So let's just put a stop to any counterplay with rook c5, b5. Now I think they will start trying to move their king up. But with queens on board, they got to be careful. That's not a given that that's going to be helpful for them. I think the main thing for me is not to get in time pressure from here. Just keep playing natural improving moves. h6, rook c8. Maybe g6. Hard to say whether g6 or h6 should be played, but I'm leaning towards h6 so that when my king eventually comes to h7, I'm not running into any d5 stuff versus if I play g6, king g7. That's the thinking there. Not much for white to do now, that I can see at least. Okay, they could try to get cute with queen a3, hoping for rook takes a3. Rook b8, that would be a disaster, but queen a3 doesn't threaten anything. Not only could I play a move like h6, but I could also probably push the pawn. Yeah, so rook b4 makes sense. Let's defend. And here's where I think white's just going to have to sit and move their king. But it's very annoying for white, again, that they blockaded with their queen. They would prefer to have their rook blockading so their queen could actually be active, but they're blockading with their strongest piece, which is generally not what you want. And even if white brings their king to the center, it's almost impossible to win my pawn on c4. But I'll be looking for a timely moment to counterattack, go after their kingside pawns, if they do something like that. So we're entering a technical phase now, where I'm trying to win with my extra pawn. Yeah, so h6, I was describing why I like that move. Think about g6 too, g6, queen d5, but I don't like that further ties me down. I could think about h5 as well, but I don't know if I want to make a weakness like that. So probably h6 is the thing to do. Yeah, let's play it. Again, keep a little time reserve. Maybe queen d5 next. Start probing. If I can ever do that with check. I still have to watch the c4 pawn, of course, but... I mean, it's not impossible that white can still draw this game, but they're purely playing passively, defensively. It's going to be a real challenge for them, whereas I have almost unlimited ways I can try to play this for a win and trick them. Still got a little dark roast left. I ordered this 4 hours ago, and I'm still nursing it. h3, yeah, so white's just going to wait. I don't know, maybe I should get more aggressive on the king side. But I don't have to make that call yet. I don't have to try to squeeze them imminently. Queen d5, king h7, h5 as well. Queen d5 does allow rook a4, which I think is not a big deal, but something I should be aware of. Maybe I start with king h7. King h7, queen c2 check. I just play g6 there, maybe. I'll just go king h7. Even on queen c2, if I just repeat, that's fine. Repeat once or twice. I mean, undoubtedly, there's a question how I'm going to make progress. But usually you worry about that only after you've won a pawn and force your opponent to play defensively. So it's not like a huge concern yet. Yeah, I think let's just repeat once. Establish that, white's playing for the draw. And I might tickle them with h5. Thinking about that. g5 also makes some sense. Both moves rather interesting. Weakening the king a little bit, but I think it could be worth it. Queen d5. There's rook a4. I'm just not sure I want to allow rook a4 quite yet. g5, if white plays h4. Do I take the pawn? I might actually take that pawn. Starting with h5 is safer. But g5 feels more ambitious and maybe good. Maybe good. g5, I don't know. It's compromises my king safety. So that's why I'm hesitating on that. And I think white's just going to chill with their own king. So h5, h4. How do I go from there? Try to work my queen in. Try to work up to e5. Getting a little low on the clock, so let's figure something out soon. I'm going to play g5. Let's go for it. Grab the space. Again, downside is I weaken my king, but I think at some point I will have to weaken my king anyways to play this for a win. So we're not going to sweat that too much. I mean, maybe white can shuffle their king and just say, hey, really, how are you going to win this? I think that's what they're going to do. So queen d5, queen d5, rook a4, rook c7 maybe. No, but then they have rook a5. Starts to get a little annoying. Okay, just play queen d5. If rook a4, I think I might even just play king h7 or something. Okay, white repeats or just moves their king back. Yeah, they're going to sit. They're going to ask me, John, how are you going to play this for a win? Which is valid. It's a very valid question. Let's go king h7. Wonder if I could get them with some thing with my queen coming to a2. That's tough, though. I don't really see how I make progress with that at the same time. Okay, queen f5 is possible now. Maybe? Gives them the pass d pawn, but I've got my c pawn. Closer to the center. Queen f5. Trade, trade. King e3, c3. Rook c1. King g7, d5. We can both push our pawns all the way down. Maybe that works. I'm going to go for it. Seems interesting. I could try to play king g7 and more or less just wait here, but don't know that I like that. So importantly, they can't play rook takes c2 because then queen takes c2 wins. And I'm defending my queen through the rook. And I'm thinking if they go queen c3, maybe then I'm working in queen d3. Take, take, and try to get my rook to c2. Not a guarantee that's winning, but I think otherwise it would have been hard to make progress. So I don't know. We'll see. This is double-edged. I don't know. The rook ending might be a draw. But I think I'm playing for a win still, so. I think for white, they almost have to trade in some way, because if not, my pawn is getting to c3 soon. And I don't think white wants that. So they might have to take their chances with some trade and hope that their d-pawn counterplay is enough. I don't think it should be, though. There might be some questions if a king and pawn ending is actually winning for me, because I am taking on doubled f-pawns. So if it gets down to 4 versus 3 on the king side, there's an open question as to whether I can win that. With rooks off the board, that is. Not 100% sure. I think this queen c2 move was a slight mistake by white. I think they should have just kept shuffling with their king. Might not be technically a mistake if this turns out to be a draw, but it gave me an unnecessary opportunity. So after a queen trade, I'm going to be trying to push my c-pawn and especially bring my king up to the center real quick. Go after white's d-pawn. Maybe if I could win the d4 pawn, that would be awesome, but... Okay, rook to b2. So are they going to try to get behind their own d-pawn? That makes sense. I don't have to commit to c3, though. I can play my king up. King g7 maybe first. Or f4 even. They might go after my h-pawn in some way. So f4, huh? f4 seems useful somehow. But also I need my king in range, so maybe I should start with king g7. c3, rook c2 doesn't seem to help quite yet. So yeah, let's go king g7. But now if they go king e2, what am I doing? King e2, king f6, king d2, king d5, king c3. Blockading. Maybe drawish then. King e3 similar. All right, let's bring the king up. So if they check king e7, I think I'm fine with that. I don't know, though, if they bring... Oh, no, they can't play king d2. That's important because of c3 check. Actually didn't see that right away, but that is important. Because I was thinking if they get their king to c3 quickly, like how do I actually break that? But maybe that's just tough for white to do logistically. So I want to get my king to d5, but there's this interplay between the various checks that we can give, or me pushing a pawn somewhere. I don't know. This is sharp. It's a sharp ending still. But they definitely can't go take my pawn. As I push and then they lose. They can't get their king back in time. So what do they do? Because if rook b4, maybe then I push. Yeah, and then it feels like I'm close to winning. Because they're going to have to go passive. And then I have time to bring my king up to d5. So this tempo, king f6, king e6, king d5, might turn out to be pretty important. d5, I play king e5, obviously. What if rook b5? c3, rook c5, take, give a check. Okay, well, let's preserve our time. Oh, are they just going to check me? Rook b7? King e6, rook b6, king d5, rook f6. I have f4, though. f4 might come in handy. I'm inching over, even though my king is not going forward anymore. I'm inching over. Ah, but maybe now they want... Yeah, maybe now they want king to d2. They do. That's clever. Did not think about that. c3, king c2. Don't know if I can play that for a win anymore. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Probably should have seen that coming. But do I have to go rook a8 now and maybe take my chances with trying to get at their kingside pawns? Maybe. Could play h5 and try to bust up their structure, but that also doesn't inspire much confidence. My king is passive. Rook a8. Wait, I could go check here and then rook d4. Or rook c4, rather. That might be the thing to do. It's almost admitting a draw, but I think I should play that way, actually. I don't know about those lines where I let white's d-pawn survive. That seems a little sketchy. Yeah, this is probably the more responsible way to play. At least their king might be cut off. I can probably still play that for a win. It's likely a draw, but... So point is, if king d3, they blunder c2. And if d5, I'll play rook d4 probably. Yeah, I think this is headed for a draw. But I don't know. Time is low. White still has a couple things to work out here, I think. This is the risk in taking on the doubled f-pawns for me with this queen f5 line. But I wasn't seeing a really compelling way to press with the queens on board. So although white played pretty passively, maybe it's a fortress. But we'll see. Okay, they take. So we're going to play 3 versus 3 on the king side. Let's take. And if king takes c3, probably rook d1 and try to very quickly get at the g2 pawn. Keep white cut off. Yeah, I think rook d1 here. And white can think about h4 trying to trade, but at least I can play g4 maybe against that if I want. Not a whole lot else to do. I mean, rook d6, trade, king d4. White's never going to lose that, that's for sure. So let's go rook d1. So it's still a little dangerous for white with their king cut off. I mean, I think it should be a draw, but white's low. They could still mess this up. So if they go h4, how am I going to handle that? Do I play g4 against that? I think I might want to. Gives white a pass pawn, so it's a little risky. They play rook b6, though. So they're thinking rook g1, rook b2, almost certainly. Okay, that's fair. But gives me f4 or f6 to start. Maybe f6. Try to work my king over. But I think they can go rook b2, rook d2. They can try to make a little bridge back to the king side. But what about rook g1, rook b2, f4? Now then their king starts coming forward, I guess. So f4 to start, but there's still h4. h4 is a little irritating. Be f6 to start. Let's begin with f6. Looks like a more sturdy move, you know? Still on the lookout for ways I could maybe win a king and pawn ending, but that's pretty far off. I need my king more active. Dream scenario, I can work my king up this way, but that's almost certainly not going to happen. Rook b5, I think I'll happily play f4, although then there's a question if h4 takes. I probably don't even want to allow that. So rook b5, maybe I play just king e6. And if white checks, I can go bring my king to g6. It's hard with those broken pawns that I have. Hard to make progress. So white plays rook b2. They're going kind of passive. But that's understandable. I totally get that. Try to create that bridge. So f4 or king e6. King e6, I think rook e2. So yeah, let's play f4. I'm not 100% sure if allowing h4 matters or not. May or may not, but seems like it had to be played. At least I'm cramping white this way. Rook e2, king f7, avoid a rook trade. There could be some scenarios where a rook trade would win for me if I can get to g2 faster than white can get to my pawns, but that's pretty far off. So rook d2, take, king d6. Can I claim I have some opposition type advantage there? I don't know. I think that's still hard to win because I don't have a clear way in with my king, even if they lose a move. Like king d3, king d5, king c3, king c5, king back to d3, f5, preventing king e4, but then king c3 is opposition again. So I think white can play rook d2. And then it's a question, do I play rook e1 or... Yeah, probably rook e1. Rook e1 idea, king e3, rook e3 check. Continue to keep white somewhat cut off. They're getting low. Yeah, let's go here. Another long game in the Lone Wolf League. Another end game. Trying to grind out advantages and win. It ain't easy, though, guys. Definitely not. So do I try to sneak my king up this way if their king remains cut off? Maybe, but they're going to continue trying to create this bridge in a lot of cases, so I have to be ready for that. And it's still tricky for white, though, with king d3 threatening rook e2, but I can play rook e3. Very annoying for them, which I think I may want to do now. Yeah, let's do it. King d4 most likely. And now, do I start trying to bring my king up the way I described? Because eventually that would win. Yeah, so if I play king f7, what are they actually doing here? They're kind of stuck, aren't they? Because rook d3, rook g2, or rook e2, getting at g2. Let's do it. This is the plan. And once I get there, I can maybe snake my rook in and win that g2 pawn. So actually, the king on d4 is probably poorly placed because rook d3, rook e2. It's very interesting. Okay, I think I have a chance now because I thought the way white was playing was okay, but maybe their king actually turns out to be a big liability here. I have won a lot of rook endings like this in my tournament career, where it appears like one side is, has everything under control, but turns out there was a problem. Still tricky, though. I'm not sure. Maybe h4 somewhere, breaking up the pawns. It is important on g3 that I can take on f3. Very, very important. So maybe white can play rook f2, actually, to riff off of that. That might be the thing to do. But then I can bring my king up still. It's still dangerous for them. Yeah, I think they're realizing their problems. So maybe they're going for a counterattack of some sort. All right, king g6. Keep my time advantage. Do they press forward with their king, like king d5, and then look for a timely moment to play rook a6? Maybe. But I could potentially win a situation like that. Few seconds left. Got to make a move. No, make a move. Oh my, they timed out. I really wanted to see how that would go. I mean, I'm happy I won, but I'm not sure this is a win. I don't know if they got despondent here and just didn't see a defense to this thing. But yeah, don't time out. Yeah, I'm not sure this is winning. I think this was a draw towards the end. Thanks for the game, though, some rapid player. Yeah, that's a disappointing end. Very disappointing end to this game, not going to lie. I'm not 100% sure this is winning, guys. If I get my king all the way to g3, then probably it should be winning, but even there's rook a6 counterplay. But let's just say in this position, white plays rook b2, and on king h5, at that moment, they play rook b6 and attack. That creates a bit of a dilemma for me, because if I go rook e2, rook takes f6, rook takes g2, then they can start bringing their king over, make contact with their f-pawn, and with king f5, rook g6, rook takes g5 maybe in play. I'm not sure that was decisive. Okay, so bit of an anticlimactic ending to that one. There was a part of me that actually worried that I might have been overpressing here. And actually, when white played rook b6 check, king d2, I thought, am I in danger of even losing this if I go for something like rook a2 and go for white's king side, but allow them to take and keep the d pawn on board? Because then they have a pass pawn. So some good prep by white, for sure, but some also pretty big errors. Bishop takes b6, and especially c4. There's no reason to play c4. So I don't know if white was trying to buckle down and just try to trade down and make a draw. Even with all that, this is one of the frustrating things if you're on the side of receiving this. Even with all that, I'm actually not sure this is winning, because you can see that white has a semi-fortress. It's just tough to make progress. This rook ending's probably a draw. But let's say instead of queen c2, white had just waited and played king g1. How do I break this? Because if ever rook d8 is played, white plays rook takes c4. I probably got to start slowly advancing my pawns on the king side. Maybe, I don't know, put the king on f6 and h5, g4 or something. But might be a draw in the end. So kind of a tale of two phases of the game in this one. We had this opening where I played my signature queen a5 Scandi, which I have a course coming out on. Make sure to get on the waiting list if you guys haven't already. Check the description for that. White played a very aggressive line, which caused me to think a lot, but I think I neutralized what they were up to. And then we got into this middle game where I was really expecting white to press with their two bishops and attempt to get in c4 somewhere. But white just started chopping and then lost the pawn. And now we're in this phase where only black can win, provided I don't blunder catastrophically. White's purely trying to wait and make a draw. And they let me have a queen f5 chance. Even then, it's probably a draw. I'm glad I found c3 check followed by rook c4. The issue is white's king is cut off here. I think if I were them, I probably would have taken my chances with h4 in this position, just to simplify. Because if I want to play for a win, I almost have to play g5 against that, it feels like. Maybe I could play f6, but that even invites h5. So Yeah, it feels like I'd have to go for g4, but then takes. I don't know. Maybe then they could play rook a6 and try to play like the game, but they have a passed h-pawn. I think by the time White realized that this rook d2, king d3 issue wasn't allowing their king to come all the way over, they must have lost belief that they could draw this. And in fairness, in my last round of Lone Wolf, I think I actually stopped believing towards the end of that last game that I could win it in that opposite colored bishop ending with 2 rook pawns. And I stopped looking for the best moves. And I didn't find the one path to win in that game. And it was very frustrating. So there's a lot of stuff in hindsight in chess that, of course, looks obvious later. So let's take a look. Let's look at the analysis board. Thanks again to my opponent, Some Rapid Player, for the game. Really good preparation, like on-point preparation. What does... Oh, the game looks so boring like this. 93% for my opponent, 96% for me. I had one mistake, which was towards the end. So I guess I played pretty well to neutralize White's advantage. Ooh, yeah, it didn't like queen f5. I thought queen f5 was a nice little chance here, but it wants me to wait. Look at that. It wants me just to move my queen. I'd be really curious. Maybe I'll have to run some engine versus engine matchups, like how I would play this for a win. Let's just follow the top lines for a moment. So king g3, king g6. Let's say king g3. That looks fine. Or yeah, king g3. Why not? h4, king f2. Okay, queen a5. Let's say, I don't know, king g1, h4, king h2. Are we really going for like a full squeeze somehow? Rook c6, king g1. I mean, there's some instances where taking and pushing could make sense, but not with my pawn on the 4th rank. If everything was shifted up a file for me, like White's queen was on c2, my pawn was on c3, they had a rook on b3, I could probably do that. I could take and then push. But here, this allows White to get back in blockade in time, which is, funnily enough, a draw because White can't ever lift their queen away from c1. Yeah, so what was that line I was looking at? Rook c6, f6, king h2. It's going to require a bunch of maneuvering. And the thing I didn't like about this and what I was a little bit worried about is, for me, I have to think very carefully about how I'm going to try to win. But for White, their moves are pretty easy. They kind of just sit and wait. Ah, so maybe we could engineer something like this where eventually you get a queen trade in with e5. Yeah, so crawling forward with the pawns is good. And I was wondering if White should play maybe h4 for that reason. Way back here. Yeah, h4 on move 30. Yeah, so that might have been a better defense, and I arguably got impatient. I think I definitely did get impatient with queen f5. But I played it because I wasn't relishing the prospect of having to find some very specific way to make progress that inherently involves weakening my king, like in this line where I'm pushing all my pawns and somewhat wrecking my king safety. I got to be very careful I don't allow d5 or something, or some sort of check. So I believe the engine when it's showing that my advantage is growing here, but from a human standpoint, I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think of queen f5? I've given my argument for it, but even still, it's hard to say. And it's not simple to play for White either, I will acknowledge, but in an objective sense. White is worse and they're passive, but it's easier for them to find moves because they can rule out their queen and their rook moving just right away. Everything has to stay frozen there so they can take my pawn. Maybe there's some cases where I could consider in some of these lines where I am pushing forward, playing rook a8, and then on takes, getting my rook into the 2nd rank. So yeah, maybe this is more of a path I would go for in a very long time control game where maybe I had 10, 15 minutes still left, plus the 30-second increment. But yeah, I'd be curious what you guys think. I thought I had chances in this rook ending, up a pawn still. rook behind the pawn. But the f-pawns are doubled. White's king is close to the center, and white does have a passed d-pawn of their own. So that appears to be a big turning point. So let's take a brief look at this line. So yeah, I was thinking white might go for knight e5, c6, bishop d3, based on that training game that they played less than 2 days ago. But I think what we're seeing is my opponents are throwing me curveballs. When rooks fly, admitted, kind of as such that they are throwing in games and variations that they're not necessarily intending to play, which is a smart strategy. You guys should do that too if you have your profile out there and people are going to be preparing for your games. So I'd be curious, some rapid player, if you want to comment on this. Did you throw in that training game with this to throw me off? Because if so, I think it worked. I was ready to play this variation. In fairness, there were other lines that this player has played against the Scandinavian. But yeah, bishop d2. So this line is potentially dangerous because the old way that they used to play the Scandinavian is c6, bishop c4, e6. But it's been known for over 20 years now that knight d5 now hitting the queen, queen d8, knight takes f6 is better for white, no matter which way black takes on f6. You take with the g-pawn, the engine doesn't like this compromised structure for white. And in the past, they've often played like this. Both sides castle queen side. And then white goes knight h4 and then g3. And there's an old game by Ponomarev from the white side against Papaionu, a Greek grandmaster, where Ponomarev went knight g2, knight f4 with the idea of h4, h5, which is very uncomfortable for this bishop on g6, as it turns out. So this line is kind of suffering for black. Also, queen takes f6, keeping the pawns together is dangerous. White goes queen e2. White has ideas of d5 and castling queenside very quickly. I've played the black side of both of those situations many, many times, actually. But I just think white is better. And that's pretty well known these days. So the modern way you play the Scandinavian is you try to withhold or delay c6 in a lot of cases. You might go c6 later, but you just don't commit to it right from the jump. Okay, so the other move here is e6, but it's starting to become known that knight e5 in this position is pretty dangerous for white because it introduces multiple attacking ideas. Knight c4, going after the queen when the queen doesn't have an escape, g4, and also queen f3. And that's very similar to why knight e5 on move 6 is also dangerous for white. And as I said in the prep, one of the best lines in the Scandi, against the Scandi, because it introduces knight c4, g4, queen f3, and also bishop c4, attacking the pawn on f7. So this move knight bd7 is designed to mainly avoid knight e5, but it also keeps touch with the knight on f6. So let's say bishop c4, now c6. If white goes for knight d5 again, you can retreat to d8. And this, I think, is a more palatable version of the knight d5, knight takes f6 stuff I was talking about. This is more or less like a Caro-Kann. Black can play e6, develop the dark square bishop, castle. I think this is fine for black. So that's why in my course I'm proposing knight bd7 here, but I have played this before on Lichess, and fairly recently too. So it stands to reason, yeah, white had some prep in mind. So I'm going to go back and look at my file after this game, but yeah, a4, a6. There's probably some games in the database with this, maybe not master games, a couple. c6, a6. Yeah, I'm pretty sure c6 is in my file. So c6, a5, queen c7, a6. Yeah, e6, just ignoring it. A takes b7. Okay, that's the top move. A takes b7 and then bishop a6. And is this where black plays queen b8? For some reason, queen b8 sticks in my head, which looks a little odd, boxing in the rook. But yeah, I think this might be in my file. Something along these lines, where you keep the pressure on the pawn. Knight a2 is possible, but that always allows counterplay. The engine likes white ever so slightly, but that's a pretty normal evaluation. So I'm glad I didn't overreact to what white was doing with pushing these pawns on the queen side. Yeah, and bishop b4 is correct. Okay, cool. Yeah, so looks like maybe white didn't quite play their prep here. Because if they were using the engine to prepare, probably it likes this better. Queen b8, and if b5, c5, something like this. It looks cramped for black, but you're going to get developed pretty quickly. Again, I think it's fine. So I'm going to give myself props for remembering how to react to this line. Bishop b4, and this is where white started thinking a lot. Yeah, they could take on c6 too, and we could play with this structure. That's interesting because white gets to keep this pawn, but ultimately looks pretty level. Probably post a rook on b8. In this line, I don't have to worry about the bishop coming to f3 or a6. So that's nice. Probably look for a moment to play c5 somewhere. Yeah, so we just had this whole sequence. Now, I didn't see knight e5, but it doesn't seem to be too big of a deal. Again, the idea is if takes, there's bishop b5, pinning and winning. So queen b7, take. Oh, take with the king. Wow. Okay, I didn't even consider that. That's actually a thing in the Scandi you can do sometimes. But that's that looks dangerous, right? Like that's. I pre-moved king knight takes d7 because king takes looks a little audacious in a scenario like this. I'm pretty surprised that that's playable actually. Wow. Something like this, and what I take on g2 in this line, you can even give up the exchange with check, even give up this pawn with check, but black's the one who has the last laugh, huh? Wow. Yeah, didn't consider that. Again, not queen takes d7, though, still runs into bishop b5. So knight takes d7, bishop e2, and now it likes black ever so slightly. And I took on c3, that appears okay. I didn't like rook c8 because of bishop e2, but oh, again, I can take here. I think I might have failed to realize that. Yeah, I think I failed to appreciate that nuance, that rook c8 in this exact position is playable, despite bishop a6. Yeah, it's funny because they would like to play bishop a6 when my rook lands on c8, but if I can take and hit their rook, it doesn't work as well. But okay, bishop takes c3 looks fine too. Oh, I can take? Oh, wow, take here, queen h3. All right, I didn't consider that. Oh, that's a nice detail. So if take on c3, sack and exchange, and I probably have pretty good play here, huh? Because white can't play queen d2, so they'd have to move their king, and then even simply castling, not even trying to take anything or check yet, is unpleasant for white. That's nice. So some little wrinkles here. I was mostly content to just take castle. But wow, I could have done this. And then queen h3. That's a little hard to see geometrically with my queen on b7 from that position. And c3 being loose, because, you know, in this position, before I take on c3, it's not possible. Or is it? I guess it's still possible. Although this isn't better for me necessarily. Yeah, I think I described some iterations of maybe sacking the exchange like this, but I don't think I considered this one where the queen comes to h3. Very nice little wrinkle. I'm going to try to remember that in the off chance that I get this line again anytime soon. So castles. Okay, so I would say some slight mistakes for me here, not considering certain moves, even if it doesn't change the eval too much. Yeah, castle, castle, bishop e4. I like this move. I was really debating bishop d5 versus bishop g6. Seems like I might have made the right call because bishop g6, although I keep pressure on the pawn, it seems harder to keep a grip on the position. Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting white to play. Queen d2, I think I was looking at. But just to give an example, something like this. Yeah, rook f c1, bishop b4. Seems like it's more likely white can get c4 in at some point, especially when they're controlling the c8 square. So bishop d5, queen d2, queen c7. Okay, rook f b1 is also possible. a6, or rook f b8, I should say. a6. All these look pretty similar. Yeah, so this position is level, and then white took on b6, which I gotta believe is a mistake. Just not a practical level. Even though it hardly moves the evaluation. I think that's just a an admission that you're not playing for an advantage anymore, which is okay in some cases, but why here? I mean, my knight is pinned. You could always take the knight on the next move, but there's got to be a more ambitious way to play. But this mistake is probably small compared to c4, because c4 just gives me a pawn. Even if white can draw this by playing perfect going forward, I still just don't like that decision, because you don't have to sack a pawn for a long time here, unless you're really, really worried about my bishop on d5. But yeah, something like rook f c1. I was considering lines like, what was I looking at here? Bishop c4, maybe? Bishop c3, let's say. Yeah, rook a c8, I guess, makes sense in this position. You could try to trade down to this ending. You might suffer a little bit, but probably it's a draw. Even a 4 versus 3 rook ending, not easy for white, but if it got down to that, it's still a draw. But yeah, just giving the pawn without a fight, I think was clearly a practical mistake. Now, I probably used a little too much time around here. Would have been nice to have some of this time back, because I don't think some of these decisions matter too much. Rook takes a1. Looks like I played the right way, but could have played this a little faster. Rook b1, queen c6, stopping rook b5, rook c5. May not matter too much, but seemed correct. Yeah, and then we get into this situation where it appears the correct thing for me to do is, you know, some long improving sequence like I was showing you guys, where I eventually try to work up to a move like e5. But there's going to be some wrinkles, like it suggests white play king h1 to avoid the queen trade. Guess I can still get an e5 in a scenario like this. Probably white is losing if we get this far. So I wonder if white should have played h4 to stop me from expanding as aggressively. And maybe I could think about g5 even here. Just grab more space, because space will be at a premium coming up. So I wonder if h4 would have been a better instance. It's tough, though, because that pawn is undefended, and white probably didn't want to make another target. Okay, so let's examine the rook ending for a moment. So this situation, you see the eval. It's apparently a draw in multiple ways. So king e3, I was thinking c3. But rook b1, there is a danger, right? There is a danger where, let's say this happens, and white takes my pawn. If I trade rooks now, yeah, I can actually lose, because the f-pawns are redundant here. I can't force a breakthrough with these doubled pawns, and white has a pass pawn. So sooner or later, my king's going to be forced to move from d5. I can burn all my tempi. I can even try for a breakthrough. White's just going to ignore it or close it up. But my king's going to be forced from d5, and white's going to start knifing their way in, and I'm going to lose. So that's the risk I'm taking with this. Yeah, it would have been better to do it with the king on g7. Even then, it might be a draw, but I think I already described my concern if I try to slow play this. But in hindsight, I should have done it, because with that increment, I probably could have played a bunch of moves to just build up time. So, but I thought I spotted a moment where you can see white is more or less forced to trade queens. What about queen c3, queen d3? This is what I was intending to do. This is also a draw, really? Can't I go rook c2 here? d5 takes, and then not even rook g4, g4. Wow. So apparently white can even draw this with 5 pawns versus 3, but they're going to win both my d pawns, it seems. Huh. So even this is a draw. It's going to get down to 3 versus 2, but white's king is close. Okay. So let's see where white went wrong. I mean, maybe king e2 was more flexible, but this seems fine. King d2, c3. Yeah, all good. I didn't want to miss my chance to go after this d pawn, though. I know the engine's suggesting f6. I was a little bit concerned about stuff like this. I guess I can still play rook c4 though, huh? Yeah, it's probably fine. Okay, so we get down to 3 versus 3, but I'm playing for a win, at least theoretically, because my opponent's king is cut off. Yeah, and so I think h4 was probably the cleanest here. Because if I take, I really doubt I can play this for a win. Rook g1, rook h2, even bringing up the king. Yeah, something like this. These pawns are just so bad. So h4. Now white chose a way that still draws, but it felt tough after king d4, still in a practical sense. So h4 is still a draw, even at this point. What if white waits? So if white just plays, I don't know, king d5. Okay, then it is losing. Interesting. If white waits too long, my king gets in. This could be lost. Rook f5. They can even get me down to just one pawn. But now it's a Lucena-like position where I guess I win because their king remains cut off. And my f-pawn is much more dangerous than their h-pawn. Yeah, even this looks a little unclear in practice, but I'm coming through here and I can take care of the h-pawn. It's key that white's king is completely cut off. So only 3 moves hold here. h4, rook f2, rook d1. What's the idea with rook f2? Oh, is that to prepare g4 maybe? Because I saw something similar to this in the game. Yeah, prepare g4 when the pawn on f3 is defended. That stops my king from getting in. Very passive way to play. But I guess white can look to shuffle now. Maybe even losing the h-pawn isn't a big deal. Or just shuffle their king. And if I take en passant, hitting their rook, they take. And this is a draw. I have a slightly better structure, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so rook f2, that's a little specific. Something like that crossed my mind, though, because you're starting to think about g3 or g4. But I thought it would lose. I thought if we got this scenario, this would be losing for white. 2 versus 1 with a very healthy structure for me, and white's king still cut off. Because then white can never really offer a trade. Yeah, I'm going to win this with the healthy passed f-pawn. Yeah, so I can see how white ended up making a decisive mistake from the looks of it, rook a2. And here's where white timed out. At least white, can take solace in the fact that this is losing at this point. But still, you want to make me prove it, for sure. Let's say something like rook b2, I was thinking. King h5, rook b6. This looks mildly close, right? Not even mildly. This does look close. King e4 or king d5. Because let's say I play rook g3 here. King f5 maybe? No, apparently that's winning. Rook f8, h4. Wow, h4 is a tough move. Rook f8. Just some scenario like this, let's say. This is what, in theory, I think white could hope for. Try for this. I guess this is still winning. Oh, but I lose to this move. Yeah, something like that. Just to hint at the king coming in. This would take some precision for me, I believe, still. I guess if the king gets in here and I threaten to take either one of these pawns, with the rook protecting the g-pawn, that is winning. Still looks close visually. Like this. Some scenario like that. I mean, this could come down to still like a tempo or two. Some scenario where I'm pushing and yeah, I have to run some interference, or maybe white sacks the rook for the pawn at some point, and I might win by a single tempo. This is actually a famous scenario here where in this position, black can play king g6, threatening checkmate if white promotes. And white would have to get a knight, but then after king f6, white's in zugzwang. So for sure, white should have made some move there and, forced me to find some way to win. But it looks like rook a2, for the record, is the decisive mistake. And this h4 move is still cropping up. Take, just to mess up my pawns. Which also blocks my king from coming in, by the way. Apparently, white can counterattack. This is still tricky, though. This is still very tricky, because this looks so close to lost. Yeah, white has to rely on some precision here. Rook b8 to prevent me from taking the g2 pawn. That's tough. That's tough in time pressure. So I'm going to say, practically speaking, white should have played h4 with their rook on h6. Seems like there's some discussion of that. And I can understand how white went astray with rook a2. I can totally understand that, because you start panicking and you see that your king is cut off. You see that rook d3 always runs into rook e2, in which case white is losing. Okay, so interesting technical game there. I'll have to study this rook ending more. But yeah, this plan of getting the king up this way appears decisive in the final position. But there were ways white could prevent that in the lead up to it. So queen f5, I think that's a big debate in this one. Did you guys like that in the moment? What do you think about that move? Aside from the evaluation of that one move, I'm pretty happy with my play in this game, I gotta say. I think I played after that pretty well, given that this is a draw. I think I maximized my chances, especially seeing rook c4 eventually. I didn't see this in advance, but I remember winning a couple endgames over the board like this, where it should be drawn, but I have my opponent's king cut off, and that increases the difficulty for them to hold it. Yeah, and I think I neutralized my opponent's prep pretty well. So maybe I could have seen some of these nuances with queen takes h3 and counterattacking. I guess it's specific to this position more so. But it's a tough evaluation. I burned a lot of time getting to this position. It's a hard evaluation to make. Okay, thanks again to Some Rapid Player. Very interesting game, very interesting prep, and some behind-the-scenes stuff. I'd be curious about your comments. And thanks, everyone, for watching. So I win. I move to, what? I think I'm on 6.5 out of 8 now. So still fighting. Still fighting for a top position as we come down to it in the remaining 3 games. I should have the white pieces next time. Not a guarantee, but most likely. And we'll see what happens. And I'm going to go check out what happened on the other boards at the top here. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think about the new mic and that queen f5 move, and along with any other questions or comments that you guys have. All right. Till next week. We'll see ya.